Three major cartels have converged on Colima, turning this small Mexican state into the epicenter of the nation's drug war. The Jalisco New Generation cartel currently controls the territory, but faces constant challenges from the Sinaloa cartel and Los Viagras, each fighting for dominance over the most valuable trafficking corridor in Mexico. The 2025 violence statistics reflect not just local crime, but a massive criminal battlefield where international trafficking routes intersect. Fentanyl bound for American streets, cocaine heading to European markets, and weapons flowing south all pass through this deadly corridor. Families now plan their daily routes around cartel checkpoints, avoiding entire neighborhoods that have become too dangerous to enter. The result is violence that has reached 158.7 homicides per 100,000 residents in 2025, a rate that exceeds most active war zones. But these numbers only tell part of the story. The numbers that define hell on earth. What does it mean for a place to become so violent that the numbers themselves stop making sense? Colima's 2025 murder statistics reveal a level of brutality that transforms raw data into a portrait of systematic destruction. The state has recorded 140.32 homicides per 100,000 residents, a figure that places it in territory previously occupied only by active war zones. This rate means that in a city the size of Colima, roughly one person dies violently every single day of the year. The mathematical precision of these statistics masks the chaos they represent, but the numbers tell a story that demands examination. To understand the magnitude of Colima's violence, consider that the global average murder rate sits at approximately 6.2 per 100,000 people. Colima's rate exceeds this baseline by more than 2,200%. Even compared to other notoriously dangerous locations, the disparity remains shocking. Syria during the civil war peaked at roughly 60 per 100,000. Colima surpasses this conflict zone by enormous margins, achieving levels of lethality typically seen only in the most intense periods of organized warfare. The year 2025 has witnessed an escalation that surprised even seasoned observers of Mexico's violence. The first quarter alone saw a 23% increase over the same period in 2024, pushing the annual projection beyond previous records and making 2025 potentially the deadliest year in the state's modern history. This pace projects over 1,160 violent deaths this year in a state of just 730,000 residents. Breaking down these statistics reveals the personal reality behind the aggregate numbers. In a state with roughly 730,000 residents, the current murder rate suggests that approximately 1,160 people will die violently this year. This translates to more than 3 murders per day across the entire state. For residents of the capital city, which houses about 150,000 people, the odds of violent death reach roughly 1 in 650 annually. These are not abstract probabilities, but concrete risks that shape daily decisions about where to go, when to travel, and how to conduct the most basic activities of life. The geographical concentration of violence makes these statistics even more devastating for specific communities. While the statewide average sits at 140.32 per 100,000, certain neighborhoods and municipalities record rates that approach 300 per 100,000. The port city of Manzanillo, crucial to understanding Colima's violence, has documented rates exceeding 200 per 100,000 in recent years. This means that in the most affected areas, the murder rate reaches levels that statisticians struggle to contextualize outside of active combat zones or historical massacres. Comparing Colima's 2025 figures to other Mexican states illuminates the exceptional nature of its violence. Baja California, long considered one of Mexico's most dangerous regions, recorded 78.3 homicides per 100,000 in 2024. Chihuahua, home to the notorious Ciudad Juarez, documented 61.2 per 100,000. Even Guerrero, which includes Acapulco and has battled extreme violence for decades, reached only 89.4 per 100,000. Colima's rate nearly doubles that of any other Mexican state, establishing it as an outlier even within a country plagued by cartel violence. The temporal pattern of murders in Colima reveals the systematic nature of the violence. Rather than random spikes followed by periods of calm, the killing occurs with mechanical regularity. This consistency suggests not impulsive violence, but organized campaigns of elimination, territorial control, and intimidation carried out with industrial efficiency. International comparisons place Colima's violence in historical context. The murder rate exceeds that of Rwanda during the 1994 genocide, when calculated on an annual basis. It surpasses the rates recorded in Bosnia during ethnic cleansing operations of the 1990s. The only historical parallels emerge from periods of active genocide, systematic ethnic cleansing, or the most intense phases of civil wars. Yet Colima maintains these rates not during a temporary crisis, but as a sustained condition that has persisted and intensified over multiple years. The demographic breakdown of victims reveals patterns that speak to the nature of the violence. Males between ages 20 and 35 account for roughly 68% of homicide victims, suggesting targeted elimination rather than random violence. However, the remaining 32% includes women, children, and elderly residents, indicating that innocent civilians regularly become casualties. This broader victimization distinguishes Colima's violence from purely criminal conflicts and moves it into territory typically associated with warfare or systematic persecution. Each of these statistics represents individual tragedies that compound into collective trauma. The mathematical precision of murder rates obscures the exponential impact each death has on social networks, economic relationships, and community structures. The economic cost of this violence extends far beyond the immediate human toll. Insurance companies have classified Colima as uninsurable for many types of coverage. Property values have collapsed in the most affected areas. Businesses operate under constant threat of extortion, kidnapping, or destruction. The state's GDP has contracted even as other Mexican regions experience growth, creating a cycle where economic desperation feeds the same criminal activities that perpetuate the violence. Medical infrastructure provides another lens through which to understand these statistics. Colima's hospitals report that gunshot wounds and trauma from violent attacks now constitute their primary caseload. Emergency rooms that once treated routine medical emergencies now function essentially as military field hospitals, processing a constant stream of victims from ongoing conflicts. The healthcare system has been forced to develop protocols and acquire equipment typically associated with combat medicine rather than civilian care. These numbers do not exist in isolation, but reflect a complex web of criminal activity, territorial disputes, and international drug trafficking that has chosen Colima as its primary battlefield. The murder rate serves as the most visible indicator of a comprehensive breakdown in social order, but it represents only the lethal tip of a criminal ecosystem that includes kidnapping, extortion, human trafficking, and massive drug trafficking operations. Yet these statistics alone cannot capture the full scope of what has been lost in this transformation from peaceful state to killing field. A paradise lost to violence. The transformation becomes clear when you examine photographs of Colima from just 2 decades ago. Crystal blue coastlines stretched along the Pacific, while volcanic peaks created dramatic backdrops for small colonial towns where children played safely in cobblestone plazas. Palm trees lined quiet streets where families gathered for evening walks. The state earned its nickname as the City of Palms, a reference to the countless coconut palms that swayed gently in ocean breezes and provided both beauty and economic sustenance for local communities. In 2006, Colima's homicide rate was under 5 per 100,000, according to Justice in Mexico, placing it among the country's safest regions. Families left their doors unlocked at night. Business owners kept their shops open late without fear of robbery or extortion. Tourists wandered freely through markets and along beaches, contributing to an economy built on agriculture, legitimate trade, and modest tourism. The state's fertile volcanic soil produced some of Mexico's finest mangoes, limes, and coconuts, while cattle ranching provided steady employment in rural areas. The geographic features that made Colima beautiful also positioned it perfectly for legitimate prosperity. The state sits strategically between Mexico's interior and the Pacific Ocean, with a natural deep-water harbor at Manzanillo serving as the country's largest Pacific port. Mountains provided fresh water through year-round streams, while coastal plains offered ideal conditions for agriculture. These same mountains that created scenic vistas also contained mineral deposits that supported small-scale mining operations, adding diversity to the local economy. Local residents from that era describe a completely different way of life than what exists today. Children walked to school without escorts. Farmers transported goods to market without armed guards. Evening entertainment meant gathering in town squares where musicians played while families socialized late into the night. Manzanillo port workers went about their duties loading and unloading cargo ships without witnessing executions or gun battles. The biggest security concerns involved occasional petty theft or domestic disputes that local police handled through community mediation rather than armed intervention. The transformation began accelerating around 2010, when criminal organizations recognized the strategic value of Colima's geographic advantages. The same deep-water port that facilitated legitimate international trade could easily handle shipments of precursor chemicals from Asia. The same mountain hideouts that once sheltered wildlife could conceal drug processing laboratories. The same network of rural roads that connected farming communities to markets could move illegal products toward the United States border. What made the transformation particularly devastating was its speed and completeness. Unlike regions where violence escalated gradually over many years, Colima experienced a rapid collapse of social order as multiple criminal organizations converged simultaneously on its territory. Between 2010 and 2015, the murder rate increased more than tenfold, jumping from single digits to rates exceeding 80 per 100,000 residents. This acceleration meant that residents had little time to adapt or develop coping mechanisms for the new reality of constant danger. The legitimate economy that had supported thousands of residents simply evaporated under criminal pressure. Farmers abandoned fields when extortion demands exceeded potential profits from legitimate crops. Tourism disappeared as visitors avoided a region increasingly associated with violence and instability. Small businesses closed rather than pay protection money to multiple competing criminal groups, creating economic desperation that criminal organizations could exploit through recruitment and coercion. Cultural traditions that had defined community life for centuries became impossible to maintain under constant threat of violence. Religious festivals that had brought together extended families and neighboring communities were cancelled after shootouts disrupted celebrations. Traditional markets where vendors had operated for generations closed permanently when extortion made operations unprofitable. Even funeral services became dangerous as criminal groups used public gatherings to target rivals or collect debts from grieving families. The psychological impact on long-term residents proved particularly severe because they remembered what life had been like before fear dominated every decision. As one local resident explained, families say they now sleep in interior rooms away from windows. Elderly residents who had raised children in safety watched their grandchildren grow up unable to play outside unsupervised. Parents who had walked freely through their neighborhoods now planned every outing around avoiding areas controlled by different criminal factions. Educational institutions that had once been sources of community pride became symbols of the region's transformation. Schools that had operated for decades with open campuses installed security gates and armed guards. Teachers who had focused on academic instruction found themselves managing trauma counseling and security protocols. Students who should have been concentrating on their studies instead learned to recognize the sounds of different weapons and identify safe routes home during conflicts. The scale of criminal operations that now dominate Colima defies comprehension. In May 2024, authorities seized 20 million fentanyl pills in a single operation, according to Insight Crime, illustrating how massive these trafficking networks have become. This single seizure represented just a fraction of the drugs moving through the region, highlighting the industrial scale of operations that have transformed a peaceful agricultural state into a criminal logistics hub. The port of Manzanillo, which had been a symbol of legitimate economic progress and international connection, became the epicenter of the criminal transformation. Workers who had taken pride in handling cargo that connected their community to global markets found themselves witnessing activities that brought international criminal networks to their doorstep. The facility that had once represented Colima's potential for peaceful development became the prize that justified unlimited violence from competing criminal organizations. This shift from paradise to battlefield happened not through gradual decay, but through deliberate conquest. Criminal organizations identified Colima's strategic value and systematically dismantled the social structures that had maintained peace and prosperity. The transformation was neither accidental nor inevitable, but resulted from specific decisions by criminal leaders who recognized that controlling this small state could generate enormous profits from international drug trafficking operations. The same geographic advantages that had once sustained peaceful prosperity for generations suddenly became tactical assets in an international criminal enterprise. Every feature that made Colima attractive to families seeking a good life now attracts criminal enterprises seeking strategic positions in global trafficking networks. Understanding this transformation requires examining the specific geographic asset that made Colima worth fighting for. The port that changed everything. Mexico's largest Pacific port sits at the heart of this transformation, and Manzanillo reveals exactly why criminal organizations consider Colima worth unlimited violence. This single facility processes over 2.5 million cargo containers annually, handling legitimate trade worth billions of dollars, while simultaneously serving as the primary entry point for precursor chemicals that fuel Mexico's synthetic drug production. The port's massive scale creates perfect conditions for criminal organizations to hide illegal shipments within the constant flow of legitimate commerce, making detection nearly impossible for overwhelmed authorities. Manzanillo's geographic position provides criminal organizations with direct access to Asian shipping routes, particularly from China, where most fentanyl precursor chemicals originate. Ships arriving from Chinese ports carry containers filled with chemicals labeled as industrial solvents, fertilizers, or pharmaceutical ingredients that transform into deadly synthetic drugs once they reach clandestine laboratories throughout Mexico. These precursor chemicals cost relatively little to purchase and ship, but generate enormous profits when converted into finished products destined for American and European markets. The economics of controlling Manzanillo port access become clear when examining the profit margins involved in synthetic drug trafficking. A single container of precursor chemicals worth approximately $50,000 can produce fentanyl with a street value exceeding $10 million once distributed in American cities. This mathematical reality means that criminal organizations can afford to spend enormous sums on weapons, personnel, and bribes to maintain control of port operations. The potential profits justify investments in violence that would bankrupt most legitimate businesses. Criminal organizations have developed sophisticated methods for moving illegal shipments through Manzanillo without detection. Containers carrying precursor chemicals arrive mixed with legitimate cargo from the same manufacturers, making identification extremely difficult for port authorities who must process thousands of containers daily. Documents are falsified to show legal destinations and harmless contents, while shipping companies either cooperate willingly or operate under threat from criminal organizations. The sheer volume of trade makes comprehensive inspection impossible, creating countless opportunities for illegal shipments to pass through undetected. Port workers describe an environment where criminal organizations exercise more control than government authorities. Specific loading docks are reserved for certain types of shipments, with armed guards ensuring that only authorized personnel approach designated areas. Customs officials face constant pressure through bribes or threats to ignore suspicious cargo, while dock workers who ask too many questions simply disappear. The legitimate port operations continue alongside illegal activities in a parallel system where criminal organizations maintain their own security, scheduling, and logistics networks. The battle for Manzanillo control has drawn the CJNG and Sinaloa cartel into direct conflict because the potential profits dwarf those available from traditional trafficking routes. Each group understands that controlling even a small percentage of port operations can generate hundreds of millions of dollars annually, making the investment in weapons and personnel economically rational. Smaller organizations also attempt to establish footholds that could provide access to international shipping routes, intensifying competition for this strategic asset. Beyond precursor chemicals, Manzanillo serves as an entry point for weapons flowing south from the United States and finished drugs moving north toward American markets. The same container networks that bring chemicals from Asia can transport high-powered weapons purchased legally in American border states and smuggled south through various crossing points. These weapons then arrive at Manzanillo for distribution to criminal organizations throughout Mexico, creating a circular flow where drugs move north while weapons move south through the same trafficking infrastructure. Mexican authorities face an impossible task when attempting to monitor Manzanillo's operations because the port processes more cargo than can be physically inspected with available resources. Customs officials can examine only a small percentage of arriving containers, while criminal organizations can afford to lose occasional shipments as a cost of doing business. The mathematical advantage lies entirely with criminal organizations who can overwhelm detection capabilities through sheer volume of illegal shipments mixed with legitimate trade. Criminal organizations have transformed Manzanillo into a fortress-like operation where they exercise territorial control comparable to sovereign authority. Specific areas of the port remain off-limits to government officials, while criminal organizations maintain their own communication networks, security forces, and administrative systems. This parallel governance structure allows illegal operations to function with industrial efficiency, while legitimate port activities continue under criminal oversight. The violence plaguing Colima's streets connects directly to competition for Manzanillo port access, because controlling shipping operations requires controlling the surrounding territory. Criminal organizations must secure routes from the port to processing laboratories, maintain safe houses for storing shipments, and eliminate competitors who might interfere with operations. The murders that generate Colima's statistics often result from conflicts over port-related territories, shipping schedules, or distribution networks that radiate outward from Manzanillo. The transformation of Mexico's largest Pacific port from a symbol of legitimate international trade into the epicenter of global synthetic drug trafficking demonstrates how geographic advantages can become strategic liabilities when criminal organizations recognize their value. Manzanillo's deep-water harbor and international shipping connections made it ideal for legal commerce, but these same features make it irreplaceable for criminal enterprises that depend on moving massive quantities of illegal products across international borders. The profits generated from this single port facility have fundamentally altered the economics of drug trafficking, creating incentives for violence that traditional smuggling operations never produced. These shipping routes have created a synthetic drug pipeline that generates profits exceeding anything seen in traditional trafficking operations. Every kilogram of fentanyl that reaches American streets produces revenues that dwarf cocaine or heroin smuggling, and Colima serves as the primary manufacturing hub for this synthetic epidemic that has killed over 100,000 Americans annually. The scale of production happening within this small Mexican state has transformed global drug markets and created profit margins so enormous that criminal organizations treat extreme violence as a routine business expense. The transformation begins when shipping containers from Chinese and Indian manufacturers arrive carrying chemicals labeled as industrial solvents, paint thinners, or pharmaceutical ingredients. These precursor chemicals include substances like 4-ANPP and NPP that appear harmless on shipping manifests but transform into deadly fentanyl when processed in Mexican laboratories. A single shipping container carrying 20 tons of precursor chemicals can produce enough fentanyl to supply American drug markets for months, while generating revenues exceeding $50 million for criminal organizations.